Shanna Stevenson is our guest today, and we welcome her back because she's spoken here a few times before. So she's no stranger to us here in Tumwater. In fact, I'm much stranger than she is. But she's been very... Did I hear Shanna laughing at her? Oh, there she is. Okay. She's been very active in our local Thurston County and Washington State history over the years. She's been involved in nearly every historic commission and history group in our area, including Tumwater. Very instrumental in the formation of the Tumwater Historic District. She did a lot of the research for that. She's developed the local historic registers and had her hand in that, given a multitude of talks and tours for the county, for Olympia, for Tumwater, Lacey, and Timbuktu. I think she might have had included one there. But she's also specialized in women's history for the state of Washington and is currently no doubt busier in retirement than she was when she was employed full-time. We're going to keep her busy, too. She's on the board of the Olympia Historical Society Bigelow House and is a contributing author for the upcoming Thurston County History book, something for which she has much experience as an author because she put together the book Olympia, Tumwater, and Lacey Pictorial History way back when that was published before I got on board with the Olympia Tumwater Foundation. And so we want to welcome Shanna Stevenson.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here today, and I'm titling my talk, The Southgate Area Intersection of History. And I wanted to talk today not just about Southgate, but kind of how transportation has really shaped Tumwater history over time. I hope you can, it's a little bit hard to see there, but this is an early GLO or Government Land Office map of the area. And on it, you can really see how Tumwater is at the intersection of the Calais Trail, the road to Little Rock, and it was a very important nexus of all of those trails coming together on Puget Sound. And the trail was likely used by Native people and the Hudson's Bay Company as well. And of course, it was the first permanent American settlers on Puget Sound who came with the Simmons-Bush Party in 1845 over the Calais Trail, locating here at Tumwater. Well, two of that party were David and Talitha Kindred, who settled in the Tumwater area. They were natives of Kentucky, and of course, they were the parents of Elizabeth Kindred Simmons. And it's a little bit hard to see here, but this is a close-up of the GLO map, and you can see that they settled right at the intersection of those two trails. And there's information that they may have been the first folks from that party to build a house here in Tumwater. And they said, it is said they built at the edge of the prairie about 2 miles south of Tumwater. So they were really in the midst of everything there at that intersection. And that intersection is a lot about what we'll be talking about today. This is a map that is an overlay of the GLO map with the contemporary map of Thurston County. It's a little bit hard to see, but you can see the Kindreds were right there just about where the interchange is at Trosper Road. So right away, that was a real place where people settled and were drawn to over time. Other prominent settlers in the area were Nelson and Anna Barnes. They came over the Oregon Trail in 1851 from New Albany, Indiana. Only took them 90 days to cross, and by 1852, they'd come to the Sound and located in Tumwater. Interestingly, Barnes, in his earlier days, was a contractor on the Erie Canal and later moved then to Indiana. He was very active. He was an early road commissioner. He helped build the Methodist Church here in Tumwater and was part of a group that was trying to move the county seat to Tumwater from Olympia in 1861. He served as mayor of Tumwater in 1871, and Barnes Lake is named for that family. Well, the trail was well used, and one of the uses of the trail was that farmers brought their grain from South County over the trail to the mills at Tumwater. And you can see in this image just at the back there the Gelbach flouring mill that was at the falls in Tumwater. Well, not only was the area the site of the Calais Trail, but by the late 1870s, Olympia and Tumwater, the Olympia Railroad passed through the property. And that's the red line there. And let's see if I can point to it on the screen here. You can see where Trosper Road, let's see, Trosper Road intersects there. And this image is a 1936 aerial from a wonderful book that I wanted to give a little shout out to by Jim Hannum called Delusions of Grandeur, the Olympia and Tenino Railroad. And he really traces the history of that railroad. And its inception came because Olympia was bypassed by the main line of the Northern Pacific, and so they decided to build their own railroad, and they built a spur to Tenino, which was the nearest point on the main line of the Northern Pacific. And by 1878, the railroad was open, and it lasted until 1916. So right away that you can see how important this corridor has been over time. And I like this other image from Jim's book that is an aerial of that area from 1936, so you can kind of get a feeling of the rural nature of that area at that time. Well, speaking of Trosper Road, we want to give a shout out to the Trospers here, and thanks to Don, he's put together a nice little history about the family. John and Mary Trosper arrived in Tumwater by train from their home in Kansas in 1892. John and his oldest sons arrived first to prepare the way for the rest of the family. Mary with the younger kids and John's parents, William and Sarah, who once lived in the small community of Trosper, Kentucky, and then moved to Kansas, were to join them. Now, Sarah Trosper had a big connection with this area because her brother was Jesse Ferguson, who had come with that Simmons Bush party and settled here in 1845. And Jesse Ferguson had a half section of land that stretched from today's Trosper Road to near where Israel Road is now. So John and Mary Trosper purchased 30 acres from Jesse and another 30 from his son David on what is today Trosper Road. It included what was called Ferguson Lake, today Trosper Lake. You guys just put your name on everything, didn't you? The source of Percival Creek. And Don wrote that at the time there was still the wonderful apple orchard planted by Jesse Ferguson in the 1850s. Well, when Thurston County was beginning to build roads at the turn of the century, their strategy was to set aside road districts throughout the county, and they hired local residents to build the dirt and gravel roads. And each road district then had an appointed supervisor from among these local landowners, and John Trosper was appointed the supervisor of the district to build this road from the Callis Trail, or Old 99, west to Black Lake. So they straightened out the old wagon road through the raw forest and created a more usable road named for Don's great-grandpa, John, and we now know it as Trosper Road. Well, moving forward on transportation history through Tumwater, travel through Tumwater by automobile was further advanced in 1919 by the establishment of Pacific Highway through Tumwater as a result of the first large-scale road building program in the state. The concrete roadway skirted what is now the east side of Capitol Lake, going southwards toward Tumwater and connected with Capitol Way at Cleveland Avenue, which was the streetcar line route at the time, and then turned west at what is now North Street and connected with Custer Way, and then crossed the Custer Way Bridge along what was then Deschutes Way through downtown Tumwater, which is at the bottom of the screen then. The road then went south along the west side of the river and followed the current old Highway 99 to Tenino. So really a different way of travel to accommodate the coming of the automobile. Well, that provided the opportunity for some attractions along the way, and one of those was the Olympic Auto Camp. This is another story of the Trosper family's involvement in that area. In 1923, Nate Trosper purchased 8.5 acres and built the Olympic Auto Camp. It featured 10 to 15 cabins, a grocery store, service station, garage, and was set in the pine trees. First they had wood stoves and then later propane cooking stoves, and they offered toilets and showers, and there was a common kitchen for travelers, and the cabins rented for $1 a night and tents for 50 cents a night. And by the 1930s, there were 28 cabins, and the Trospers lived in the back part of the store, and later lived in the auto court complex at the rear of the property. The Trosper sisters cleaned the cabins and worked in the store. In later years, these cabins were rental units, and the Trospers sold the camp in 1942. So you really get a sense of what Old 99 was like at that time, and offered an opportunity for travelers. And I love the period automobiles there, too.
About where was that?
Well, it was right at this intersection of Trosper Road and Old 99. And this is another good view of the concrete roadway that was Old 99. And the lower picture there is, I believe, on Trosper Road looking towards the auto camp. So you can get an idea of what that area, that intersection that we're going to talk a lot more about, looked like at that time. So really part of the travel history of the area, which continued, of course, into the Freeway era. Now, some of you may remember the last of the auto camp, which was still there along South Capitol Way for many, many years, and was only torn down in the 2000s. So that was a remnant of the Olympic auto camp. Well, in 1936-38, the next major road change through Tumwater was built when current Capitol Way Bridge, the famous Totem Bridge, was constructed under a federal project on the east side of the river, bypassing downtown Tumwater. And the realignment took off from the 1919 route just south of Linwood Avenue, angled across the river where near the then Tumwater Lumber Mills plant, went east of the new Olympia Brewery facility, and then onward through the old Tumwater Club Hall. The roadway cut a swath through many houses and resulted in the relocation of Tumwater Lumber Mills to West Bay Drive in Olympia, and connected with the 1919 route on Cleveland Avenue. And this new highway really provided a straighter route to Olympia and a wider roadway. So you can see here how this new configuration was a little bit different than the earlier one. Well, this also provided the opportunity for a new commercial area in Tumwater, and you can see it there. I don't have a pointer, but it's just in the northern top part of the picture there on the roadway. And it was Tumwater Square, which of course still stands here in Tumwater. That was developed by Frederick Schmidt in 1946, and early businesses included the Mueller Meat Market and Cold Storage, Raiders Grocery, Heath Hardware, a variety store, Gillette and Guffey Drugs, and it was later owned by the Raiders, and for many years, Gillette and Guffey, right? I had a fountain there. It was remodeled several times, and of course, still here in Tumwater. But it was really the beginning of the change of the commercial history of Tumwater, and you might know also the Wildwood Shopping Center on Capitol Way dates from about the same period. So this is the beginning of the shopping center era in our area. Well, by 1948, plans were underway to construct a new roadway to accommodate increasing automobile traffic and relieve the bottleneck in downtown Olympia at 4th and Capitol Way. The routing in this new freeway through Tumwater drastically changed the area, gutting the historical center of town. The new roadway was authorized by Washington legislative bonds in the late 1940s and completed with federal interstate highway funds when the interstate program was inaugurated in the 1950s. However, by 1954, when cost estimates had been done, a new highway commission balked at the approved route, and they were looking at alternatives. And Tumwater Canyon, with its bedrock foundation for the roadway, was proposed as an alternative. The new route would virtually wipe out Old Tumwater and cross the new Capitol Lake in a wide curve and cut under Capitol Way at 27th Avenue through Olympia to connect with Martin Way. Ray Johnson, mayor of Tumwater in 1954, was at first emphatic in his opposition to the route through downtown Tumwater. However, he said in examining the highway department cost estimates, he saw the logic of the proposal, and there were some benefits for Tumwater. Tumwater would get an interchange at Trosper Road, which would provide development for Tumwater's southern area. Also would be new routes for east-west travel, including a new bridge over the Deschutes to supplement the aging span seen here from 1915. Also, Tumwater got a trunk sewer line to connect with the city of Olympia, as well as an upgraded water system in the area of the freeway Johnson concluded, quote, "If they are bound and determined to come this way, then we're going to insist on our pound of flesh." And this Tumwater City Council eventually signed the agreement by unanimous action. So over the next 4 years until the formal opening of the freeway in 1958, the topography and future growth and shape of Tumwater would radically change. So here is little old downtown Tumwater, I think, right before the freeway construction, or maybe at the start of it. Here you can see the new bridge and how many of the buildings are gone. The freeway right-of-way cut a 200-foot wide swath through Old Tumwater, taking with it many familiar landmarks of the town, as well as the sites of Washington's earliest settlement. Nearly 100 houses and buildings were either razed or removed. Gone were the old Hewitt drugstore and post office, the site of the Cornell House, the site of the Lee and Biles store, Kiefer Saloon, Wallace Hotel, and Kratz Hotel. So what was downtown Tumwater was covered over during construction, and some longtime residents recall that the downtown was really not flourishing in the 1950s. As I mentioned, a new type of commerce was coming to the forefront. Many homes in the downtown area, which dated from the 19th century, were in poor condition. So here's some views, courtesy of State Archives. Here's an overall view of the construction by 1956. Here you can see looks like the freeway bridge there is almost done, and how that whole swath of land has been cleared out through Tumwater. And this gives you an idea of the construction of the interchange at Capitol Lake. The building of the 6 1/2 mile stretch of roadway beginning south of Tumwater and connecting with US 99 near the old entrance to St. Martin's College involved the construction of 25 bridges and included the first triple-level interchange in the state at Capitol Lake, when Highway 9 to Mud Bay through the west side of Olympia was added at the request of the city of Olympia, and involved moving 3 million cubic yards of fill in order to reshape the area to accommodate the freeway. Well, famously, this project opened in December of 1958 to a lot of fanfare. Governor Rossellini was there, the director of highways, mayors were there, and this opening ceremony even included marching bands, so it was a really big deal. Besides the new bridge over the Deschutes, there was also an undercrossing at Linwood Avenue. And it was then the Tumwater Trosper Road interchange, a modified cloverleaf design, which created a new nexus for Tumwater with retail, hotels, gas stations, and restaurant, which remains today. So this was very early on, just near the time of the completion of the interchange. And here's a couple more views a few years later from 1961, looking at the interchange development at that time. Yes, this is looking kind of northwest towards Burns Lake. Well, of course, what was everybody's favorite site? The Tyee, right? It was developed by Ralph Swanson and his brother Jim, who were local realtors. Each of them owned a third ownership, and then another third was stockholders. And a member of the Swanson family actually built the hotel. And this is kind of an early view when it was just starting out. Now, people thought Ralph Swanson was crazy to build this hotel so far out of town, but he was really looking towards the future. So I was talking to a member of the Swanson family, and I said, well, how come the Tyee, right? And she said, well, it was named after the University of Washington yearbook, the Tyee. So, and they really carried out the Native American theme. I don't know, does anybody remember the Tom Tom room? And the waitresses, I understand, had Native American themed outfits. And it really was so popular that it grew over time. And here's some images from postcards. There's lots of postcards out there. If you look on eBay, there are always Tyee postcards and promotional booklets. It was open from the beginning 24/7, but initially didn't even have a restaurant. By 1961, though, it had a coffee shop, dining room, banquet room, the Tom Tom room, and swimming pool. The Swansons sold the Tyee in 1968 but it was called the Cinderella Hotel and the focal point for many years of Olympia's social life. And by the early 1970s, it had over 200 rooms and 11 banquet rooms. Here's some more kind of really period photographs. And here's the tom-tom room with the big tom-tom drum. And then a big part of it were the Cabana suites that had their own swimming pool. And I don't know if you can read the writing there, but it was, I think they were claiming it was one of the first in the United States, so it was really a big deal. This was the governor's suite, and there were inaugural balls, in fact, held at the Tyee. Well, folks who were living here then may remember the great big fire at the Tyee in January of 1970. The fire started in the kitchen, and staff started to alert guests, but it was Thurston County deputies who kicked in doors of some of the rooms. Most of the hotel, according to the newspaper account, was ablaze in 15 minutes because there was a really strong wind that night. It raced through the east and west winds, and it was very difficult to fight for the firefighters. It destroyed 159 units. Only the original part of the hotel survived, along with 11 of the cabanas. And fortunately, no one was injured. There were minor injuries to firefighters, smoke inhalation, and so forth. And only 50 rooms then remained after the fire. The hotel was sold in 1971, and then by 1972, it reopened in February of 1972. They rebuilt it with the traditional Native American theme, including carved totems in front of the building, and basically the interior was rebuilt to the former design. So one of the lower pictures there is kind of how I remember the Tyee. Many of you probably do too. If we have a few minutes after my presentation, maybe we can reminisce a little about the Tyee. Well, they had another fire in 1972 in the Cabanas, and this one famously started in the room next to that of trumpeter Harry James, who was playing at the hotel at that time. And it continued to grow over the years. In 1974, they added 52 units. In the late 1970s, it became Vance Hotels, sold again in 1985, big facelift in 1987, and sold again in 1989, and then in the 1990s was known as the West Coast Tyee Hotel. So this is kind of how I remember it when it was the Vance Hotel. Well, by mid-1999, the decision was made to raise the hotel, and it closed later that fall. And in October of 1999, Peter Callaghan of the Tacoma News Tribune wrote an article about the Tyee, and I'm going to quote here from that article. He said, "Anyone who experienced Tumwater's Tyee Motor Inn during its glory days uses the same description. It's where the real business of the legislature was done." Committees may have met in Capitol office buildings. Representatives and senators performed their official duties in the Dome Legislative Building, but the deals were cut in the dining room, around the pool, and in the bar. If you were in the dining room or lounge, before the evening was out, most of the movers and shakers would be through the Tyee, said one former legislator. You could go out at night and find 2/3 of the legislature there, said another. Your bills were written, your campaign contributions were taken care of, and your dinner and drinks were paid for, said a staffer. That was the 1960s, before the early morning fire. It was rebuilt and regained a little of its status as the place to be, but competition from newer hotels, reforms requiring public disclosure of all entertainment expenses by lobbyists, and changing ethical standards for legislators conspired against it. But others recalled the new motel was an oasis of mid-century kitsch. It had swimming pools and loud music and plenty of vinyl, and the politicians and lobbyists flocked to it. At one point, it had the busiest bar in the state. Said another, it was a bright new place, and it just caught on. The sprawling motel was the winter home to about a quarter of the members of the legislature and many lobbyists. Live entertainment, sometimes including national acts like Frank Sinatra and Liberace, helped pack the lounge, and the jacuzzi suites near the pool were a popular venue for rowdy parties. At the time it closed, the then manager said the hotel had lost out in competition with cheaper new motels and full-service hotels that had been kept up. And the then owner, Starwood Hotels and Resorts, decided to sell rather than renovate. This is a tired old property, he said. So unfortunately, that was the end of the Tyee that many of us remember. And there were celebrities there besides the one I mentioned. Of course, we said Liberace. Bob Crosby and the Modern Heirs were there. David Jansen stayed there while filming the Ring of Fire movie in Shelton. So it was a glittering place. Well, in its place, we've had a lot of new retail built there, including Fred Meyer. And you may know that the city negotiated the trees that were around the Tyee were to be saved when Fred Meyer was built. Costco, Walmart, Albertsons, Walgreens, and if you've been to that area recently, there's a brand new building coming up. So it's really grown since the end of the Tyee. Well, I wanted to go back a little bit to this view of that interchange in 1971, and the Department of Transportation did a series of reports about what happened at the freeway interchanges economically, and I'll just quote from a 1971 report. The Trosper Road interchange, located at the south city limits of Tumwater, is an excellent example of massive commercialization around a freeway exchange. This combination diamond cloverleaf interchange was opened in December of 1958, and commercialization began immediately. At the present time, this was 1971, there are 9 service stations, 3 restaurants, 2 motels. There's also a complete shopping center complex with grocery, supermarket, barbershop, drugstore, laundromat, public library, builder supply store, and dry cleaning establishment. And I thought this next part was interesting. The location of this interchange seems to be a contributing factor to the success of commercial establishments. Being the first point of exit as the motorist enters the vast Puget Sound region and city of Olympia, gasoline stations and restaurants are well utilized by freeway traffic. This has been confirmed by the operators of the concerns around the interchange. So it really precipitated a lot of commercial development, as we see. This is another great view from state archives of the interchange. And we'll talk a little bit about Southgate. The Southgate stores really began in the early 1960s with the Vatney family building a store, formerly the Southgate Supermarket, I believe, was either the first or second store. Of course, it's changed over time. More recently, it was an Ace Hardware, and I think just this summer it's changing again to a dollar store. Southgate Rexall was built in the early 60s. The shopping center was built there with a builder supply and laundromat. There's the restaurant, which originally was a pancake house, and Jiffy Lube, which was originally a Binger's gas station. And here's some images from state archives, and I just love the design of these buildings. It really evokes the 1960s, so really modern. This was a new way of shopping, and a big part of the changes that took place, I think, precipitated by this interchange. And I think, Don can correct me, that the name Southgate probably sprung from the Vatney's creation of their store there.
It was the entryway to Tumwater from the south, so it was the Southgate.
Right. So many of us fondly remember another part of Southgate, right? The Tumwater Library, which was there for 30 years. It was hard for me to believe, but I have a lot of fond memories of taking my own children there. And before we got the beautiful new Tumwater Library in 1995. So another way in which it was really part of the Tumwater community. Well, what I like to call a gaggle of service stations were located here. Seems like from that 1971 report, you could see, I think they said there were 9 service stations that were built in the area. And I think the taller the sign, the better to attract people off the freeway. And Many of those service stations are still there, but many have changed or closed as well. And I think it's kind of indicative of that area that it was kind of built initially, or a lot of it, to serve the traveling public, but it's really changed in character to serve more of the people here in Tumwater. Well, another landmark that was located right at the intersection there was Big Tom's, located on the east side of Capitol Boulevard near the intersection with Trosper Road, built in the late 1950s. Now, many of you probably know the history of Millie Egan, right? She was the one who developed the goop that made Egan's Burgers very famous. And the Egans started with their first restaurant on 4th in Olympia, opening it in 1948. Then on the west side in 1949, of course, that was when, before the freeway, that was the route to the harbor. And they had as many as 9 drive-ins that had Big Tom's or Egan's name on them. Buckley, and Tacoma, Lacey, Chehalis, Olympia, and Tumwater. This particular one was torn down in the 1990s for redevelopment, but of course there's still a Big Tom's on Capitol Way. Another of the longtime businesses in the area were owned by Terrell and son Earl Polk, who operated a mobile gas station near the site of the present Jack in the Box. And it was also the home of the Cogs Car Club. I don't know, any of you a Cogs Car Club member? It was popular during that period for car clubs. They later then bought the building on Capitol Way and started Pogue's Automotive and Towing. And they bought that building in 1975. And after the Pogues, it was later owned by Warren Berg, who sold it in 2010. And now is a different building. Business is in that building. Another part of the landmarks of that area was Thompson's Corner. And Lena Thompson owned a gas station and grocery from the 1930s to the 1950s, and at what was known as Thompson's Corner, which was the northwest corner of Trosper and Capitol Way. And you can see here the Thompson store and gas station with the flying red horse there. And besides the store and gas station, there was a feed store and barber shop next to the grocery and gas station. And Lena Thompson's grandson told me that she often helped those in need, and people went to the store and often got some credit if they needed it. And that's Lena down at the bottom there. She's pumping gas. And the other picture there is of Jack, Irene, and Lena Thompson inside the store as it appeared probably in the early 50s. Well, the current Thompson's Furniture was originally a Laro feed store, and the phone number was 6342, and if you call Thompson's today, that's their phone number, so that's pretty good. They told me that the family home was next door, and the Laro Feeds was owned by Lena's son Joe and his wife Lillian. The feed store burned in the early 1940s, and this is an image of it, and then was rebuilt in 3 sections with an apartment in the back. And the transition to the current Thompson's began in the late 1950s when Thompson's leased the building out as a used furniture store, but then took it back and operated it as their own antique store. And they worked with the folks, the Meyer family from the Delphi area, Dr. Ed Meyer and his brother Frank. By the 1970s, the Thompsons added new furniture to the antiques and developed it into today's very successful Thompson's Furniture, still owned by Don and Donna Thompson, who are the grandson and his wife of Lena Thompson. So it's 3 generations have owned businesses in that area. Mr. Thompson told me something interesting too, that where Walgreens is today, he said, used to be a horse arena. I was unable to find any pictures of that. He said the sheriff's posse used to drill there. So all kinds of different elements of history in that area. So another kind of blast from the past. Some of you maybe remember the Sunset Drive-In, which isn't really at that intersection, but it's close by. It operated from 1949 to 1986, this is according to a website about drive-ins. And it used its original projectors and sound system throughout its life. They were saying it was, they used telephone poles for the support of the screen, and the picture was 40 feet high by 94 feet wide, and used asbestos tiles for the picture area. You may remember the theater was demolished in 1987 and was replaced by the Tumwater City Hall, which now occupies the site. The original driveway of the theater now takes you to the Timberland Regional Library next door to the City Hall, so you can kind of visualize there. And just a short history from 1941 to 1949 to 51, Berg and Miller owned the theater. From 1951 to 1954, United Drive-Ins owned the theater, and the Zabel family from Olympia owned it in the 50s to 1977, and ended up being a Tom Moyer's luxury theater from 1977 to 1986. And another footnote here, the Point Tavern, which at one time had the marquee of the theater at the top of it, and of course it too has been torn down and is now a 7-Eleven. So that's what happens, I guess. So just to think about the changes in that area, just looking at the interchange over time, this is a recent map view from the county of, must be pretty current of what the intersection looks like now. There have been some changes over time. In the 1980s, they added a new on-ramp and did some other configurations, changes to the configuration. In 2011, when the Walmart was built, they paid for some changes to that intersection, widening the off-ramp and creating a dedicated turn lane and stoplights and so on and so forth. So there have been some changes and updates to the original cloverleaf design, but as you can see from the aerial image, it's pretty much as it was when it was first built. And the contemporary image gives you some more ideas of the numbers of development that have happened clustered around that interchange. So I thought it was really interesting when I was looking at when the freeway opened in 1958. There's a little brochure about its dedication, and they estimated at that time that the traffic volumes were going to be this: 3,600 cars a day from the south, 2,200 from the west, 5,000 from the east. And I just looked at the City of Tumwater website, and they are estimating currently on I-5 per day, 102,000 cars pass through this intersection. On Little Rock Road, there are 14,000 cars a day, and Trosper Road accommodates 35,000 cars a day. So it's really become a nexus and an intersection of Tumwater history. So that concludes my remarks, but I thought we would maybe leave some time for some reminiscences about the Tyee or some of the stores, Big Tom's. Anybody go to Big Tom's and enjoy that? So anybody want to speak up about their memories of this intersection of history? Yes.
In the 40s, up here to the right, turn left to go to Olympia. There was stores right along in there. Well, in the middle of them, there used to be a roller skating rink.
Right.
When it was built, or when it,
Yeah, I think that may have been the Tumwater Club.
It had been, yes.
Yeah.
In fact, it was manual pin setting. My uncle got a job as a teenager.
Oh, those
setting pins.
I was in high school in 47. We used to go up here to roller skating.
Uh-huh.
I've lived in South Lacey, Olympia area since 1936.
Oh, my. Oh, great. Everybody hear what he said? In high school, I used to do some roller skating at the Tumwater Club. Others with some memories of the Tyee? Bob?
There were lots of stories of hanky-panky down there. I wonder if anybody's ever written some of those up?
I don't know if they have or not, Bob, to be honest with you. Yes.
Well, I came here in '73 to teach at Tumwater, and I taught high school shop. And my shop coats were the old Westboy jackets from one of the fires at Tyee.
Oh, no kidding. So they were repurposed then,
Yeah.
huh? Interesting. Other memories of the Tyee or stuff? Yes.
When we first moved to this area, we lived in Chehalis, which was a culture shock from after living in the Blue District in Seattle. And I belong to the local chapter of a sorority for women, which traditionally held their annual dance in the Chehalis Armory, or Centralia Armory. And one year, our chapter was involved in organizing. We decided that instead of having the ratty old armory, we would have an elegant dinner dance in the Tyee. And I have never heard such an uproar in Centralia and Chehalis, having to drive all that way to the big city. And I was so appalled that Olympia and Tumwater was a long way away and considered the big city. The Tumwater gave a wonderful dance and a wonderful dinner, and everyone said afterward they were so glad they came. But I just was, I was so sorry that Tyee left, because it was really the only elegant place to go. And I still miss it.
Me too. Other memories of yes.
Well, in the latter half of the 1880s, I was single. And in the 1980s, I was single, and the Tyee was the place to go first. Now, there wasn't any hanky-panky that I knew about the Fifth Quarter restaurant.
The Fifth Quarter restaurant.
That's right behind the teriyaki place. That was John Elway's uncle.
Oh, it was. Oh, listen. Didn't know that. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Other memories? Yes.
Well, this is a little bit different approach, but I've just been looking at this freeway for so long, and I grumble about the freeway whenever I get a chance. So I thought I'd tell you that in 1960-61, I was in the Wyoming National Guard, and we came out here for the Berlin crisis when Kennedy was president. And I decided to buy a car, and I saw the ad in the paper for a car in Portland. And I got on a bus on the weekend and rode all day to get to Portland. There was no freeway, and it was a nice ride. It's terrible now.
Well, of course, it took him a long time to complete the freeway. This was just a very small segment of what was to become I-5. So 1958 was an early part of that, but it took, I think into the 1960s before all of I-5 was completed. Other memories? Anybody remember going to Big Tom's?
Oh, yes.
Does anybody remember Thompson's store? I was intrigued with that. Yeah, that's correct.
I don't want to give
Well, that concludes
Here's a
my
menu.
Oh, a menu from the Tyee?
Pass the menu around.
Oh, okay. Great. Yeah, as I said, there another big seller are the matchbooks too from the Tyee. Of course.
That had Chief on it. It's called Chief Kick in the Butt.
Oh, it did.
They either had to go with the chief or a salmon. To be politically correct, and the discussion was over, they stuck with the Indian thing.
I see.
I have the minutes from every meeting they ever had. Chucky Swanson, Jim is my dad.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, thank you for
Yeah,
coming.
I've been going through these. It's a hoot. And
Well, thank you for bringing that. Yeah. Well, as I said, there are there's lots of memorabilia from the Tyee. I think that really points to it was a memorable place. You know, all these postcards that are circulating. People wanted a memento of being at the Tyee. So thank you for your attention.
I wish the Trosper family could have charged a toll for all that traffic that goes on our road. We'd have been millionaires by now. How many people bought a mobile home from Charlie's Trailer Sales, which is across from the Tyee on Little Rock Road? And do you remember in my kid days, there was a putt-putt golf course. That was the big craze for a while, right where the Mills and Mills Cemetery is now. It was Olympic Memorial Gardens then, but just out front, they had a putt-putt golf course, and I got first prize once in a tournament there. How about the Oregon Trail Restaurant? Remember that? Turned into the South Pacific. How about Jake's Used Cars? Okay. I mean, you come up with a lot of landmarks. The Point Tavern, Shanna mentioned the Point Tavern. So we're trying to compile all this into a Tumwater history collection that I would like to make a book out of, and or maybe a series of books about Tumwater business history from the pioneer days up to the present. And this is a rich topic. Yes?
What about the buildings to the left of Capitol Way above the golf course? There's an antique shop in there, and
Oh yeah,
what was
there was a
that?
rest home there for a while. Clara May Rest Home is in that building, and not too far down where the La Quinta now is roughly there, where there was a beginnings of a hospital that was being built on the hillside, and it never got finished. This lady was building it for her son, who was a doctor, and she was trying to coax him back from Chicago, I think, to Tumwater, but he didn't come, and so that building never got built or finished into a hospital. And I think, yeah, just some stairways off of Capitol. That's right. Yeah. So we can go another 20 minutes, I suppose, with my memories. Yeah, yes.
The Oregon Trail was also headquarters of the Owl Party.
Oh yeah, that's right. And it was a jazz band kind of a place for a while too. When the Red Kelly, that's right. Red Kelly, that's right.
And I think that Owl Party experience resulted in a change in state
It did.
laws about
It did.
who could qualify for
Oh.
the ballot. So
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
At the time, I didn't give a hoot. I know. How about Heath's Flowers? Another business that was so prominent at the Heath family. Oh yes, a lot of. Remember all the mom and pop grocery stores? There was the one on North Street Grocery. There was one on Capitol Boulevard. There was the Holden's and the meat market, the Tumwater Food Lockers on 2nd Avenue. All kinds of little grocery stores all around. So a lot of different things that have happened around. Anyway, thank you for coming, and this is the last of our season here, but we're going to start up again in October. In the meantime, in the summer months, we're doing our Riverwalk tours down at the Falls Park, starting in mid-July. Yes?